If you think you know who this is, please don't hold back and let's have some answers here. Okay, hint. Alright, so I'm telling you, he is Al Pacino. So that's not my question. He is Al Pacino. And he's actually acting in a play written by Shakespeare. That is Shylock in Merchant of Venice. But then, what does Merchant of Venice got to do with a debt crisis? Any answers to that? Do you guys agree that Merchant of Venice is actually about a debt crisis? Yes? Did I hear a yes here somewhere? Okay. Now, if you guys would recall the plot of Merchant of Venice, at the heart of that plot lies a 3,000 ducat debt. Who took this debt? Anybody? Okay, from whom was this debt taken? Shylock. And who took this debt? Bassanio. What was the interest rate? Well, the interest rate was zero. There was no interest involved. But what was the collateral? Is Merchant of Venice a comedy or a tragedy? Does it end on a happy note or on a sad note? Sad? Did I hear? Okay. It actually ends on a happy note because someone resolves this debt crisis. Who resolves this debt crisis? What does she do to resolve this debt crisis? She restructures the debt. Now, this is something that you'll hear a lot of people talking about. You will hear this word mentioned in newspaper writing. You will see people like me using it when they write in newspapers. That debt was restructured. So what did Portia do? She simply said, okay, a 3,000 ducat debt has been taken and in exchange a pound of flesh has been promised, but in the process of taking that pound of flesh, not a single drop of blood must spill. And with that clever restructuring, the debt crisis was resolved. Now, as you guys may have read in the papers or heard on TV, Greece, modern day Greece, today's Greece, has had its debt restructured. Okay? It has had a situation where creditors, now modern day creditors are not like Shylock, they are very different people and we'll get to them later. But where creditors have been told, no, you cannot get all your money back. You have to give up 75% of whatever it is that you lent to Greece, and they have had to accept. So the kind of restructuring that Shakespeare was writing about back then is still very, very modern, and it is one way to solve a debt crisis. Now, this is the time to actually define a debt crisis. What do you think a debt crisis is? Anybody? Just give me an answer. What is a debt crisis? Well, when you've taken on debt and you can't pay it back, right? That's a debt crisis. Okay? So, debt is a messy business. It has always been so throughout human history. Who is this guy? Okay. You need a hint. A Victorian era novelist. And we are celebrating his 200th birthday this year. What does Charles Dickens's Lost Childhood tell us about a debt crisis? Now, many of you guys may not know that when he was barely 12 years old, his parents were sent to a debtor's prison because they could not repay the debt that they had taken. And young Charles had to actually work in a shoe polish factory to survive. And he would actually go and meet his parents for meals, and then he would, get out of prison and go and work. And those are some of the impressions, because throughout his life he was then fascinated by prisons. Now, what does Dickens's Lost Childhood tell us about a debt crisis? Because whenever we talk about a debt crisis, the first thing is, why doesn't the person who's taken on a debt just pay it? And why isn't he forced to pay it? We look at a debt crisis in terms of a morality play, that if you've taken on debt, well, then you must be able to pay it. But there are people who are seriously unable to repay their debt. Now, in Victorian England, the solution was to put such people in prison. But today, this is not how a debt is resolved. Because if this is the way debt is resolved. Now we have already seen two very different and dramatically opposite way to resolve a debt crisis. One we saw where the creditor was asked to get lost. Shylock was told he's not getting anything back, not his pound of flesh, not his money. So there, the creditor, the person who lent the money, was arm twisted by Portia into forgiving the debt. Here, it is the debtor who has to suffer, and not just the person who took the loan, but his entire family, including his 12-year-old son. So, this is on a continuum. If the debtor, the person who takes the debt, and the creditor who makes the loan, now, neither of the two solutions is particularly appealing in today's world. So, there has to be a balance. Because if there is no balance, then well, if the creditor knows that he will never get his money back, he will never make a loan or make it at very high interest rates. These interest rates are also called usurious interest rates. And most religions actually forbid against usury. But if the law always favors the creditor, then debtors will never take a loan, will never want to take a loan, and these debtors mean also people who take mortgage loans. So they go and live in their own houses that they own, which they pay for 20, 30 years. Governments will not take loans with which they can build hospitals, schools, nice schools like this, railroads, airports, power plants. So the most things that we take for granted in modern society today require debt. Debt or credit is a type of an engine oil on which the entire locomotive of global commerce today runs. So to make sure that this grease keeps flowing, we have to make sure that the creditor and the debtor's rights are balanced. Now, today, everybody knows that there is a problem of too much of debt in the world. And these are the countries which are facing a debt bomb. You see their names there? And now, what I mean by this is that people who lend these countries money, not all of them mind you, but some of these countries have lost confidence in the ability of these countries to repay their debt. Now, my next quiz question is, which three countries in this debt bomb that you see here are different from the other five? Which means they have their own currencies. What is the name of UK's currency? Right. Japan? Right. And US everybody knows. So now these are the countries which issue their own currency, and that is a very crucial feature. The other five do not enjoy that flexibility.